Hi friends, I am Uday Kandpal and I welcome you all to yet another lecture on NCERT Class 8 History Chapter 6 with fact elaboration by Uday Kandpal. So, the name of the chapter is Colonialism and the City, the story of an imperial capital. So let's start. So what happened to the cities under colonial rule? In the late 18th century, Calcutta, Bombay and Madras rose in importance as presidency cities. They became the centers of British power in the different regions of India. At the same time, a host of smaller cities declined. Many towns manufacturing specialized goods declined due to a drop in the demand for what they produced. Old trading centers and ports could not survive when the flow of trade moved to the new centers. Similarly, early centers of regional power collapsed due when local rulers were defeated by the British and the new centers of administration emerged. This process is often described as de-urbanization. Cities such as Machilipatnam, Surat and Seringpatnam were de-urbanized during the 19th century. By this early 20th century, only 11% of the Indians were living in the cities. The most splendid capital of all was built by Shah Jahan. Shahjahanabad was begun in 1639 and consisted of a fort-place complex and a city adjoining it. Lal Killa or the Red Fort made of red sandstone contained the palace complex. To its west lay the walled city of 14 gates. The main cities of Chandni Chowk and Faiz Bazaar were broad enough for royal procession to pass. A canal ran down the centers of Chandni Chowk. Delhi during the Shah Jahan's time was also an important center for Sufi culture. It was several dargahs, khanqahs and idgahs. Open squares, winding lanes, quiet cul-de-sacs and water channels were the pride of Delhi's residents. Yet even this was no ideal city, and its delight were enjoyed only by some. There were sharp divisions between rich and the poor. Havelis or mansions were interspersed with the far more numerous mud houses of the poor. The colorful world of the poetry and the dance was usually enjoyed only by men. Furthermore, celebrations and processions often led to serious conflicts. The making of New Delhi. In 1803, the British gained control of Delhi after defeating the Marathas. Since the capital of British India was Calcutta, the Mughal emperor was allowed to continue living in the palace complex in Red Fort. The modern city as we know it today developed only after 1911 when Delhi became the capital of British India. Demolishing a past. Before 1857, the developments in Delhi were somewhat different from those in the colonial cities. In Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta, the living spaces of the Indians and the British were sharply separated. The establishment of the Delhi College in 1792 led to a great intellectual flowering in the sciences as well as humanities, largely in the Urdu language. Many refer to the periods from 1830 to 1857 as a period of Delhi Renaissance. All these changed after 1857. During the revolt that year, as you have seen, the rebel gathered in the city and persuaded Bahadur Shah to become the leader of uprising. Delhi remained under rebel control for 4 months. The making of New Delhi. When the British regained the city, they embarked on the campaign to revenge and plunder. The famous poet Ghalib witnessed the events of the time. This is how he described the ransacking of Delhi in 1857. When the angry lions, the British entered the town, they killed the helpless and burned houses. Hordes of men and women, commoners and noblemen poured out of Delhi and three gates from the three gates and took shelter in small communities and tombs outside the city. To prevent another rebellion, the British exiled Bahadur Shah to Burma, now Myanmar, dismantled his court, razed several of the palaces, closed down the gardens, and built barracks for the troops in their place. The British wanted Delhi to forget its Mughal past. The area around the fort was completely cleared of the gardens, pavilions, and mosques, though temples were left intact. The British wanted a clear ground for security reasons. Mosques in particular were either destroyed and to put other uses. For instance, the Zinat al-Masjid was converted into a bakery. No worship was allowed in the Jama Masjid for the 5 years. One-third of the city was demolished and its canals were filled up. In the 1870s, the western walls of the Shahjahanabad were broken to establish the railway and to allow the city to expand beyond the walls. The British now began living in the sprawling civil lines area that came up in the north away from the Indians in the walled city. The Delhi College was turned into a school and shut down in 1877. The British were fully aware of the symbolic importance of Delhi. After the revolt of 1857, many spectacular events were held there. In 1877, Viceroy Lytton organized a darbar to acknowledge the Queen Victoria as Empress of India. Remember that Calcutta was still the capital of British India, but the Grand Darbar was being held in Delhi. During the revolt, the British had realized that Mughal emperor was still important to the people and they saw him as their leader. It was therefore important to celebrate the British power with pomp and show in the city as the Mughal emperors had earlier ruled, and the place which had turned into rebel stronghold in 1857. In 1911, when King George V was crowned in England, the Darbar was held in Delhi to celebrate the occasion. The decision to shift the capital of India and Calcutta to Delhi was announced at this Darbar. New Delhi was constructed and as a 10 square mile city on Raisina Hill, south of the existing city. Two architects, Edward Lutyens and Herbert Baker, were called on to design the New York and its buildings. The government complex in the New Delhi consisted of 2 Mile Avenue, Kings Way, now Rajpath, that led to the Viceroy Place, now Rashtrapati Bhavan, with the Secretariat building on either sides of the avenue. The features of these government buildings are borrowed from different periods of India's imperial history, but the overall look was classical Greece, 5th century BC. For instance, the central dome of the Viceroy's palace was copied from the Buddhist stupa at Sanchi, and the red sandstone and carved screens of the Jalis were borrowed from the Mughal architecture. But the new buildings had to assert British importance. That is why the architect made sure that the Viceroy's palace was higher than the Shah Jahan's Jama Masjid. Life in the time of partition. The partition of India in 1947 led to the massive transfer of populations on both sides of the new border. As a result, the population of Delhi swelled, the kinds of jobs people did changed, and the culture of the city became different. Days after Indian independence and partition, fierce rioting began. Thousands of people in Delhi were killed and their homes looted and burned. As streams of Muslims left Delhi for Pakistan, their place was taken away by equally large number of Sikh and Hindu refugees from the Pakistan. Refugees roamed in the street of Shahjahanabad searching for empty homes to occupy. At times, they forced Muslims to leave or sell their properties. Over two-thirds of the Delhi Muslims migrated, and almost 44,000 homes were abandoned. Terrorized Muslims lived in the makeshift camps till they could leave for Pakistan. At the same time, Delhi became a city of refugees. Nearly 5 lakh people were added to Delhi's population, which had a little over 8 lakh people in 1951. Most of these migrants were from Punjab. They stayed in the camps, school, militaries, barracks, and gardens, hoping to build new homes. Some got the opportunity to occupy the residences that had been vacated. Others were housed in the refugee colonies. New colonies such as Lajpat Nagar and Tilak Nagar came up at this time. Shops and stalls were set up to cater to the demands of migrants. Schools and colleges were also opened. Inside the Havelis, the Mughal aristocracy in the 17th century and the 18th centuries lived in the grand mansions called Havelis. A map of the mid-19th century showed at least 100 such Havelis, which were largely walled compounds with mansions, courtyards, and fountains. A Haveli housed many families. One entering the Haveli, though, through a beautiful garden gateway, you reached an open source courtyard and surrounded by public rooms meant for visitors and businesses used exclusively by males. The inner courtyard with the pavilion and rooms were meant for the women of the household. Rooms in the Havelis had multiple uses and very little by way of furniture. Even in the mid-19th century, Qamar al-Din Khan Haveli had several structures within it, and including housing for the cart drivers, tent pitchers, torch wearers, as well as for the accountants, clerks, and the household servants. Many of the Mughal amirs were unable to maintain these large establishments under the conditions of the British rule. Havelis therefore began to subdivided and sold. Often the streets front of the Havelis became shops for warehouses. Some Havelis were taken over by the upcoming mercantile class, but many fell into the decay and disuse. The municipality begins to plan. The poor conditions of the walled cities, however, did not stop it from expanding. In 1888, an extension scheme called the Lahore Gate Improvement Scheme was planned by Robert Clark for the walled city residents. The idea was to drop residents away from the old city to a new type of market square around which the shops could be built. Streets in the redevelopment strictly followed a grid pattern and the were of identical width, size, and character. Land was divided into regular areas of the constructions of the neighborhood. Clarkganj, as development was called, remained incomplete and did not help to decongest the old city. Even in 1912, water supply and drainage in these new localities was poor. So, thank you for listening to my lecture. Hope you learned a lot for your competitive exam. Bye bye. Have a nice day.